This morning, many of us were already at the Board of Police Commissioners meeting in support of the Dubois family. I'm going to say a couple of the things that I said there this morning, and then I'll add a couple of additional comments. Many of you have the photo that was distributed in a handout, so that you have a picture of Haven. The thing I would want to start off with by saying is, for me, similar to Robin's comments, it's very concerning that we once again have a case where the families are having to act as de facto investigators and to aggressively be advocating on behalf of their loved ones when they should be actually grieving the loss of their loved ones. We've seen this with the Michiskinik inquiry, and we're seeing it again now with Haven's death. So there's 10 things I would like to state relative to Haven's death that I hope the public and the media will think about. And the first is first and foremost, Haven was a 14-year-old child, and he was found dead in a ravine by his mother. And I think that that's the most important thing for us to always remember. We have a 14-year-old child that died in the city. We need a coroner's inquest to understand why. The point of a coroner's inquest is for us to get answers into the cause or matter of death, and more importantly, one might argue, is also to find out if we can prevent a death like this in the future. And I hope all of us here would agree that we want to prevent the death of a 14-year-old child. The second thing I would add is that Haven experienced bullying and harassment. And I am led to believe that we live in a city that prioritizes and is deeply concerned about bullying. So we need to ask some serious questions there on whether or not that was pursued in the investigation. The third thing I would point out is that Haven experienced gang intimidation in our city. And similarly, we're told that we take gang intimidation seriously in this city. Was that investigated? The family experienced intimidation following his death, including graffiti that indicated people writing that they had killed Haven. So intimidation happened before and after his death. We have to ask if that was investigated. As was referenced earlier as well, Haven had marks on his face. He had other marks on his body, but he had marks on his face that weren't documented as far as we understand in the coroner's report. And those were marks that the family saw and asked to have documented. As was also discussed, witnesses have now indicated that he was being followed. The vehicle and the witnesses that were associated to seeing Haven, most likely in the last moments or minutes of his life, were not secured in a timely fashion from what we can understand, or we need to understand if that was the case. Information from the family appeared to be largely ignored during the course of the investigation. We need every stone unturned when a 14-year-old child is found in a ravine, and we need to know that those stones were unturned. The death was reported as unsuspicious when the family was coming back from the hospital that day. And while we greatly appreciate the work of the media, it raises a question on whether or not RPS actually designated that an unsuspicious death the afternoon that a 14-year-old child was found in a ravine. Because I would hope that we think that most 14-year-olds found in a ravine should be highly suspicious. Moreover, we don't know if that meant that that was the end of the investigation. And the last thing I would say, the 10th item for me, and it's part of a larger, more general concern that I'm seeing as a trend, in which families have to fight for justice when their loved ones have passed away, where they have to be constantly trying to find answers and not necessarily getting answers from Regina Police Service. That media and others are talking about deaths before the families know, and this isn't at all about the media, this is about how Regina Police Service is communicating with the family. Also a question around delays and presumptions, and whether or not every possible angle was looked at in the case of the death of Haven. So this morning we were calling upon the Board of Police Commissioners and the police chief, the current police chief, to find out whether or not they're going to actively and aggressively reopen the case. Today we're asking, though, for the coroner to step in and have a coroner's inquest. That means we're calling upon the Minister of Justice to open up that inquest. A month ago, we saw the end of the Michiskinik inquiry, and in that inquiry we heard a lot of similar trends and issues raised. And that jury came back and overturned the findings of the coroner and determined that that death was undetermined. And that's what Rochelle is asking for today.